So in the previous video, we selected an empty activity, and then Android has built our application for us. If you look on the left-hand side, you will see that there are some folders here on the left-hand side. We have the manifest, we have the Java file, we have the resource folder, and then our Gradle scripts. Now, in our manifest file, you see Android manifest.xml. Now, the manifest file contains information about the application. So in here, every time we create a new activity in here, it will put the name of the activity here. So you can see here that this is just the information or the permissions or attributes about our application. You can see here that it says that the theme is login application. The main activity is supposed to be the main activity that pop up to the user. So that's the Android manifest. Here's where we put permissions in as we go on and build our application. Then another folder that we have on the left-hand side is the Java. Now in there, you have 3 folders. The one that we usually use is the first one, which has our main activity class, which is our activity class, which allows us to be able to have references to objects, to code it, to attach events to views. And then we have our resource folder. And our resource folder has several folders in there. We have the drawable, which has all the images. We have the layout, which has the layout of what an activity should look like, one activity is going to look like. Then we have the map, we have values and XML. The one that today we're going to focus on is the activity layout. So let's go to the activity layout. So in the activity main, what we'll have here is we have the beauty about Android has given us a design environment, which allows us to be able to drag things onto the screen, to be able to use it, well, to build using graphical user interface or build just dragging things onto the screen, UI, whatever. So what we have here on the left-hand side, we have the palette. The palette allows us to drag view objects or views onto the screen. So some of the views that we have here is we have, of course, in the common, you will see the common things that are usually used. Then in the text, you see we have text views, plain text, password, emails, phone. Now, the equivalent of this in HTML or PHP is when you have your input type, text input type, number input type, email input type, well, anything else that you have, buttons, submit buttons, reset buttons. So this is an example of that here. And this palette allows you to just generally drag things onto the screen. Then we have buttons, widgets, layouts. So how layout our containers, helpers, Google, and obviously legacy items. And then at the bottom of it, you have a component tree. So as you build your application, as you put views inside view groups or as you nest things inside some of the view objects or view groups, you will see the tree of how your application is being built. The XML is organized in an XML hierarchy. So you'll be able to see the parents, the children, and so forth. Then in the middle of it, you'll be able to see how your application will look like. And then on the corner side, you'll see a design. Currently, we're using the design side. So if I wanted to split it, I wanted to use XML code and also use the design, I am allowed to, because remember that the activity or the layout is built using XML. The design side of it, when we drag things onto the screen, it actually creates code for us in the background. So I can actually write my code in XML, or I can also write it in design. So if I split it, I'll be able to see the code and I'll be able to also drag things onto the screen. And then I can also build it fully in code. It's totally up to you. The decision is yours, how you would like to build your application. So in this case, let's just say that I'm going to build a simple application which allows me to enter a username and a password. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to build it using the design side of things and also the code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to change my layout to a linear layout, because for the purpose of this tutorial, I like to use linear layouts. So I've got a linear layout now. Now, if I was to go to our layout, you will see that I have constraint layout, linear layouts, horizontal, vertical, frame layout, table layout. So each time I select a linear layout, I have to specify to Android what kind of layout I would like to use. So I'm going to specify that I want to use the vertical layout. So I'm just going to enter orientation, and I'm going to choose vertical, which basically means how I would like my view items to be organized onto my screen, and I liked it vertically. So in this case, I've just chosen the vertical one. And then I have a text view in there. But what I really want to, remember I told you that we're building an application which will allow us to put an input, well, 2 input text fields, email or username and password, and then a button that when we click on, it will check whether the person that's logged in or the person that's not logged in. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to drag things onto the screen. So the first thing I'm going to drag onto the screen, I'm going to keep the text view in there because I will need it for later on, is I am going to drag, I'm going to go to my text side and I'm going to look for plain text. Now, plain text means input type text, the HTML equivalent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this onto the screen. And then I'm also going to drag another one onto the screen. Usually I would use a password, but for the purpose of this tutorial, just so that we can see what we enter into it, I'm also going to choose a plain text, and I'm going to put here 2 text fields. Then the next thing I need is a button. Okay, so I'm just going to click on a button, and I'm going to drag button onto the screen. Okay, so you can see here that as I've been dragging things to the screen, you saw that the XML was updating. Now, every single view that you have needs to have an ID, okay? Even your layout needs to have an ID, so that if you want to make some changes, or you want to have references to it, or you want to add properties to it, or you want to attach an event to it, you'll be able to reference it in our main activity class, which I will show you later on. But in this section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the IDs of these views, and then change the attributes. So for example, the ID, I'm going to give this ID of EDT, let's say username, so that I'll have reference to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text from text to hint. The reason for that is because text equals name means that whenever the user is entering something, and it will always start from name, is something that's already populated in there. So what I would really want is a placeholder. In HTML, we have placeholders. In edit text, we call them hints in Android. So then I'm going to put username, so that the user will know that you're using username. And then the second thing is my password. So EDT password. And then the text that I'm going to change the text to a hint. And then I'm going to put password. Then for my button, I'm going to call my button BTN login. And then for the button, I'm just going to say login. So you'll see that there'll be some changes on the design side of things. So that's my login. And then for my text view, for the text, I'm just going to leave it empty because the text is what is meant to show, but I'm going to add an ID to it. So when I start to write an ID, Android Studio helps you to write an ID. So I'm just going to call it TXT display. Now I'm going to use this text view to show an information to the user. Okay, so what do we have here is we have successfully been able to create, added 2 text fields onto our screen. And to even make it better, just so that I want to give the user something to also let them know to say sign in, just to improve. I'm just going to put a text view at the top here. And then this text view is just going to be TXT info, really. I'm just going to add a margin top to it, 30 dp. And then let's try and do margin bottom as well. Let's see if, yes, just so that we have, and then let's try something called gravity, and let's put it in the center of it. And let's add a text size to it. We can do 30 dp. Yeah, and then for the text view, we can say sign in. Okay, so this is basically our Android application that we're going to have in a way. So what we have here at the moment is even my linear layouts. I'm just going to add an ID to my linear layout just so that in case I want to reference it later, I'll be able to. And for linear layout, I usually use LLY. I'm going to call it main. And then we have that. Let me try and see. And then this is what we have currently. So we have been successfully been able to create design an Android application with a username and a password, a login, and a sign in at the top. Now, this doesn't do anything at the moment. It's just a screen that the user will see. If they press on everything else, it wouldn't work. Nothing would work, but they'll be able to see it. Now, what I need to do now is you can see that these warnings here, if you click on them, it will tell you that, whatever. So it's telling me to use SP instead. So if I use SP, it's telling me to use SP rather instead. Again, it doesn't like hard-coded text. That's why, because you're expected to use strings. We'll come back to that later on. If you click on here, it's telling me that the size is too small. So if I click on it, it will fix it. You will literally see that it's increased the height of it. If I go to the password again and I touch it and I click on fix, it will change it to another thing. And if I'm actually not going to bother with this one because most of it is just a warning now. For now, we don't need to worry too much about this, but later on we'll come down. We'll come back to it. So this is how you create a simple Android interface, or design with a username, a password, a login, and a sign-in.